ever since Peter the Great came back from his grand tour of Western Europe, Russia's had this very problematical love-hate relationship with the West, both as a political entity, a geographical entity, and as a kind of ideological concept. And I think it's worth keeping that in mind, because I think the thing that comes to my mind when I think about what's happening to LGBT people in Russia is the word scapegoat. It's a diversion tactic. It's to take people's attention away from what's really going on in Russia in terms of the economic crisis, high levels of unemployment, and similarly to the way that immigrants are being used here by the right-wing media as a kind of whipping boy. The LGBT community are playing that role in Russia right now. And as the journalist earlier said, the one good thing is if you're being legislated against, it actually does mean that you exist, and you certainly exist as a threat. The 19th century German philosopher Peter Chardiev, in the first of his philosophical letters, which were circulated illegally and written in French, because Catherine the Great was hugely influenced by France at the time, and insisted on French as a kind of cultured language for the Russian nation, challenged this notion that Russia had always had of being an exceptional country, the notion that Russia was superior in many ways to other countries, other nations. And he said that Russia is an exceptional nation, but it's a backwards state full of slaves, and its only purpose is to teach the rest of the world what not to do. And I certainly think this applies to Putin's administration right now. And he kind of created what was called a gunshot resounding in the dark night, by this statement, and helped to define a kind of a dialogue and a debate that's still going on in many ways today about this resistance to westernisation. Putin seems quite happy to accept certain aspects of Western capitalism, but not the more liberal levels of tolerance towards the non-normative lifestyles. And this whole notion of the nation also helps to explain why it's far-right neo-Nazi groups that are going around doing the dirty work for Putin in terms of suppressing any kind of lesbian or gay presence or voice. But the overriding question essentially is, what do we do? How can we, from over here, do anything if you're not prepared to do anything in terms of physically opposing what's going on? What can we do? Well, I think we can do everything in terms of even just clicking a like on a Facebook page for a Russian gay and lesbian activist group, having conversations after today with people who may not be aware of the situation over there. And I think, events like this, this could become a regular thing. It's about getting political. It's about recognising that not everybody has the freedoms that we have over here, and that we are a kind of an oppressed minority. Even if we have those freedoms here, as lesbian, gay, and transgender, and bisexual people, we are hated and violently hated. And if any one of us is hated, then we're all hated, and that needs to be changed. Some things are changing. Some news is good news. I don't know if any of you saw recently that the Georgian president, Mikhail Saakashvili, has told the United Nations that Putin is exporting homophobia, and he's very vocal. He was very vocal at the United Nations recently about his own and his country's opposition to what Putin is doing. There are satellite states from the ex-USSR that Putin is attempting to have some kind of control over, because he doesn't really have any control over them, and his legislation against LGBT people is part of an ongoing process of holding on to other satellite states in the Russian continent that he doesn't really have much power over. So when we think also about the message that the IOC, the International Olympics Committee, are giving to the lesbian and gay community, that they don't believe that the Russian anti-gay propaganda law is in any way contravening the Olympic Charter. This is clearly not true. Any petitions that you can sign There are multiple petitions from various organisations, often about the same thing, but sign any and every petition you can get your hands on. Share those petitions with people via Facebook, Twitter, emails, whatever. Because things like this do make changes. The threats and public pressure against Stolly led to them changing their legislation in terms of treatment of LGBT employees. So it might seem, oh, nothing's going to happen if I just click a button, but things can happen in these situations. So we need to also think about whose political agenda this law is serving. The answer can be found in the key phrase from the law that says it's prohibiting the distorted understanding of the social equality of traditional and non-traditional sexual relations. So what is a distorted understanding? Who decides what is distorted on what legal grounds? In reality, what this means is that the government, with the clear backing of the Russian Orthodox Church, has the correct understanding. That is, traditional heterosexual relationships are healthy and normal, whilst non-traditional LGBT sexual relationships are perverted and dangerous to society. And anyone who disagrees with this and believes that LGBT members should have the same basic rights and legal protections, something that is guaranteed by the Equality Clause in Russia's constitution, would then have a distorted understanding and be subject to fines of up to 5,000 rubles. But if there is anyone who has a distorted understanding of the LGBT issue, it seems it is the lawmakers and the pro-Kremlin analysts who spread the homophobic myth that homosexuality and paedophilia are synonymous and who often portray LGBT people as circus freaks and predators. In fact, one of the neo-fascist groups in Russia right now is appropriating the phrase occupy that is being used in a progressive sense here in America around changes in capitalism and changes in the economic situations that we're facing. There's a group out there who've reappropriated this in the most heinous way by calling their group Occupy Paedophilia. And this age-old conflation of paedophilia and homosexuality seems to be going on over there as much as it ever has over here. Duma deputies believe that Russia's LGBT phenomenon is a morally noxious virus that the West has infested Russia with, together with prostitution, pornography, drug abuse and unhealthy fast food chains. Thus the argument goes the law must impose harsher penalties on foreigners from the West because they are the chief provocateurs behind the gay propaganda campaign. They are the ones who are plotting to weaken Russia by corrupting its traditional values, exacerbating its demographic problem and increasing its number of AIDS cases. The irony is that the new law is presented as a defence against gay propaganda, but the real propagandizers are the government and the church, who are trying to impose their spiritual, traditional, moral values on those who have non-traditional values. And this is a de facto violation of Russia's constitutional clause and on equal rights, separation of church and state and the prohibition of the state ideology. Russia, it would seem, is also taking a page from one of the worst chapters of US history. Just as the authors of the anti-gay law cynically hide behind the cover of protecting minors, US racists during the decades-long segregation period hid under the hypocritical pseudo-legal cover of separate but equal. Unlike Russia's anti-gay law, segregation laws send a clear signal to all Americans in the South. Sent a clear signal to all Americans in the South it's okay to discriminate, beat, degrade, and even lynch African Americans. And in a similar way, this anti-propaganda law is propaganda, and it's sending a very clear message that LGBT lives are worth nothing. And I think everything that we do in terms of changing it, we should be doing. Starting here, I guess, as Johnny Wu said earlier, the revolution starts today. Thank you.